Here we are for another episode of the Cozy Corner of Cinema. This is episode number 229, being recorded on a gorgeous Tuesday, August 25th, 2026. It's the last throes of summer out here, and we're starting to get into a little bit of that, I don't even want to say cooler, but warmer weather. Today was a very warm day. Very warm in a good way, not very warm as in humid. It's just one of these days where you're driving with the windows down, you're going for a walk, you're spending time outside, reading or writing or just being inspired by your surroundings, and really kind of makes you appreciate where you're at, really makes you appreciate being alive in that moment. It's just such a gorgeous time of the year because before the fall sets in, we get that cooler kind of weather, people start layering up. The leaves start changing colors. We can really appreciate the summer in context, I'm sorry, not even in context, in retrospect, or we can look at the summer where people are trying to pull you away from what you want to do. If they're trying to pull you to like a barbecue or to go out and do something, if you want to do it, then God bless you, go for it. But there is sort of this general kind of social idea of being out and doing something where sometimes you just want to do your thing, and that's not you being rude. That's you really kind of putting your time forward and being upfront with people without being rude. You don't have to be a jerk about it. You just say, hey, that's something that I'm more interested in doing. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for this. I don't want to, I'm not interested. No, thank you. Or you do want to, you do want to go to the barbecue. You do want to go and socialize. There's no wrong decision there. But the summer is just so inspiring, and the fall is so inspiring. The fall brings to mind just really good, cozy reading. Before the daylight savings comes into the winter, we start to kind of have that mentality of, going home earlier, staying in, getting under the blanket with a good book or a good film, or working on whatever you're writing or whatever kind of a creative output, I should say, that you have. Excuse me for a second. I got water and coffee here, but I really ain't doing much for soothing the throat. But it's a beautiful day, and the coffee's still warm, so that's a great sign right there. And we're going to talk about some films. I keep saying we. I've said many times we. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. Really, it's just me. It's just me, myself, and I right here. But I think slip of the tongue sometimes happens where I go, hey, we're going to be doing this. Well, I'm going to be doing this. And I guess we together as a collective, you and I, the listener. You the listener, I, the speaker. You know what I mean. So I guess we, as in you and I, if you choose to listen, we're going to talk about the Findlays, Roberta and Michael Findlay, who I'm surprised have not, I shouldn't say surprised, I'm the one running the ship, so to speak, but have not mentioned really on the show before. I talked previously about Sleazoid Express, the great book about the different theaters on from the Deuce from the 1960s into the 1970s in New York, the different types of cinemas, different kinds of films they would show, and a look at the films. And it's interesting to read some of this now with time past, and a lot of these films we now have more information of, and are now more widely seen, more widely available. It's a very well written book, and it's fascinating to kind of see the authors. The book's in the other room. I'll try to pull up the names here, but the authors' opinions on a lot of these films, because that's what it is. I mean, it's a guide through the times of the grindhouse cinema in Times Square, the times of the 70s into the 80s, or the 60s into the 70s, I should say, not necessarily the 80s, but a lot of the big kind of exploitation films that were big, that were bringing people in off the street. Bill Landis, by the way. Also, I mentioned before, which the last time, Bill Landis actually wrote one of my favorite books, which is about Kenneth Anger, just called Anger, the unauthorized biography of Kenneth Anger from it says 1995, but I don't remember exact. I don't know if that is if they did any other kind of versions of it or not. But that is, if you can get your hands on a copy of that, that is just one of the great film books, and that as well kind of gives you a new appreciation and new perspective into the work of Kenneth Anger. His films shrouded in mystery and ambiguity for so long, and Kenneth Anger is such a for a while, I think, such an enigma an alluring kind of figure. And then, in interviews, you start to lift the veil back and learn more about the process of his films, where he was at the point of each of these films being released, the Magic Lantern cycle, and that being the whole kind of centerpiece of it. His famous works like Invocation, My Demon Brother, and Lucifer Rising, and it's really just one of the great film books. And I recommend that highly, highly, highly. And I recommend the BFI's Blu-ray set, which is the Magic Lantern cycle, which has all of his short films on there. Or at least I'm pretty sure all of them, unless there's some that I'm not aware of. But either way, I also got to pick up that Stan Brakhage anthology that Criterion put out. It says volume 1 and 2, which is a collection of his work, I believe. Yeah, 26 films. I definitely got to be picking that up. I really should have picked that up this past sale, and I didn't. But that's okay. There's another sale coming up in November. But these film. Anyways, I'm going. Wow, I went completely off there. I started from Bill Landis. I'm all the way over to Stan Brakhage. But either way, it's interesting to kind of see Bill Landis' perspective on a lot of these films that were coming out at the time. Not only the films that he liked or didn't like, but also the response from the audiences at that point, which I find some of the most fascinating stuff. How an audience responds to a film, and how riled up a lot of these films would make people. Films like Fight for Your Life, which is it's a notorious film in its own right. It's just so big, and the dialogue is just so extreme, and so pushing every button that's almost like a film you'd want to see, like with a rowdy audience, because it would make you uncomfortable, but then it also give you into that kind of like that feeling of watching with other people, where you're almost kind of waiting for somebody else to respond to the film, to maybe ease the tension, to ease to ease sort of the thickness in the air, but also how much he does not strongly dislikes a film like Cannibal Holocaust. In fact, he writes very negatively. Um, and the extremity of that film, that film really kind of checks off all the boxes in terms of cannibalism and sexual assault and animal abuse, and it's the one, truly, like the tagline says, it's the one that goes all the way. And speaking of which, that 4K just got announced, which boy, I snatched that up. Really looking forward to watching that new version of the film. But with the book, it's interesting to kind of see how he writes about even films like Last House on Dead End Street, aka The Cuckoo Clocks from Hell, I guess you could say notorious Roger Watkins film. But the way that he writes about it almost kind of makes you wonder if he had seen the original Cuckoo Clocks from Hell version, which is now lost. That's a 3-hour version of the film, although he does not make any mention of the runtime. But the way that some of the scenes are described in the book, they sound far more ghastly than when you actually go to watch it. And I actually do like Last House on Dead End Street as a very moody, very atmospheric kind of film. Less as something grotesque. I mean, there's violence in the film, of course, but when I was reading this, I was always kind of taken aback by how inflated maybe the content was. I mean, where on paper, if you tell somebody, well, here's a film where a character gets stabbed and their guts get pulled out and then they get beheaded. You can have 5 different filmmakers do that in 5 different ways, and how that can be something very grotesque and very upsetting, or almost very avant-garde. Or it's the way that a filmmaker kind of handles what's on paper. But then again, it almost makes you want to go back and rewatch it, because a film like that I've only seen once, and I go, I really didn't have. It really didn't affect me quite as much as that. And you got to look at it as like, well, you were seeing all these other films and people at the time didn't know what they were walking into. Context is very important. But either way, it's wonderful to read about these experiences and read about, the different kind of audiences that were responding to these films, ones they liked, ones they didn't like. Films were getting repackaged. Films, freely edited films released without a rating, and then they say it's rated R, or films they say they're going to cut and then they don't cut it. And how many films have just been lost in their full uncut version? I was watching Last House on the Left, Wes Craven's film, last night with my fiance, and I was sitting there thinking about, I've known so between the how much the film has been reworked and re-edited and how many versions of it out there. It almost makes you wonder, is there a complete and completely 100% uncut version available? And I don't know for the life of me. That's one of these films where, excuse me, where I've heard so much he said, she said about this version or that version or this VHS tape, this UK VHS tape, or this old version. I really don't know. I did watch the Arrow Video most complete version allegedly, but somebody more knowledgeable than me can give you perspective, or can give, because I was watching even a scene when a character gets their guts pulled out, and it's very quickly edited, very quick. It's almost like a blink and you miss it kind of moment. And you go, was this from something more? And I think it was, because I read that book about the making of The Last House on the Left a little while ago, and I know that goes more into detail, I think, about that scene in particular. But anyways, my point is that we're talking about Sleazoid Express. We're talking about these films, and I have not talked on the show about Roberta and Michael Findlay, because I watched last night one of their films that was released by Something Weird and Dystropix, which was a total Something Weird title. This is one that I actually had to look up, like, Something Weird released this, right? This is like right up their alley, and it was. This isn't a 2-pack set of The Ultimate Degenerate and 1,000 Pleasures. This was directed both by Michael Findlay, and I would say most known probably for the Flesh trilogy, which I always forget the order of it. It's like The Curse of Her Flesh, The Touch of Her Flesh, The Kiss of Her Flesh, which has also been released by Something Weird and Dystropix. That's just one of my favorite Blu-rays that I own, and it is interesting to watch this film with the context of Sleazoid Express and the context of what the Findlays were doing. Roberta and Michael Findlay's films that were being made at the time that were very, a lot of torture, a lot of softcore sex, a lot of nudity. Michael Findlay died very young, died in a very strange way, which I've heard as well a lot of he said, she said about his death. Which I won't try to relay and get information wrong, but it involves him getting killed by a helicopter. It is just you got to look it up. I'm not going to try to even sum it up here. Even when Bill Landis writes in the book, it's different than how I've heard it. Somebody told me, well, not somebody told me. I read that he was decapitated by a helicopter blade. The helicopter crushed him or something like that. I've heard so many different stories about this. I feel like it's almost urban legend at this point in terms of what actually happened, at least the information that I've been received. But Michael Findlay, so he died very young, and Roberta Findlay goes on to have a known career. I mean, she has so many films under her belt, a controversial filmmaker, because even in the book Bill Landis writes not so highly of her, and she's a kind of a notorious figure in her own right in the way that being interviewed and what she say about other filmmakers and stuff. And it's also interesting, I've talked about before on the show about American triple ecstasy, or American ecstasy I should say, and the Findlays' relationship with the Amero Brothers and the films they were making, most known for Blonde Ambition. And, they went off and did their own thing after being involved with the Findlays. And The Ultimate Degenerate, I think I read, was something of a remake of Body of a Woman. Is that the title? Body of a Woman? Oh my gosh, I am blanking on the name. And it's a film that was, I guess it's now A Body of a Female. Actually, was a Body of a Woman. I guess I'm not wrong there. Body of a Female, which is now a lost film. And I would recommend you get the book because there's plenty of great photos in there. There's a photo, I should say. There's plenty of great photos in there as is, but a photo of the it playing in Times Square. And I think The Ultimate Degenerate is, I said something of a remake of it. This was co-directed by John Amero and Michael Findlay. And it's for as popular of a film as it was, you gotta think optimistic about these kinds of films that are supposedly lost showing back up. Doesn't that happen all the time when talk about this film is lost, that film is lost, and then it pops up one day? There's a lot of films like that, and I think Body of a Female, I'm confident, will show up one day. Maybe the adult film Him will show up one day too. There's ads out there for it, and someone's got to have a copy somewhere. You figured that all this lost media that gets found because somebody happened to stumble across a film reel they had, or it's in an attic, or it's in some larger than life situation where it's, oh, they found it here and here, and um, well, I mean, I went totally off topic there. But when I was talking about The Ultimate Degenerate, it's a cool, cool film, man. I tell you, it's one of these very moody kind of films where it's very erotic, very sensual as it is sexual. And then there's just some strange, kind of odd moments there. I mean, this is like kind of rough filmmaking. And I mean rough in a way where some shots are out of focus. They're just walking down the street with a camera, and the camera's at an angle, and it's not totally in frame, but it adds to its own kind of charm that we can appreciate in context as well. And that's the key word there, is context. But Michael Finley's in the film as well, and there's some strange scenes involving corn on the cob that evokes Troll 2. That's right, evokes Troll 2. You guys remember the corn on the cob scene in Troll 2? Well, here we got some more corn on the cob, predating Troll 2 in The Ultimate Degenerate, and in ways that were not meant to be used. Well, I guess you could use it that way, but I'd recommend taking a shower after, so to speak. But it's a cool film, man. I really have been liking what Something Weird have been bringing to release with distro picks, as well as a lot of the AGFA titles, because Something Weird, they lend a lot of their titles out to to like Kino Lorber for their what was that line, that Blu-ray line they were doing? I forget what it was, but it was all these older 30s to 50s informational kinds of films, kind of oddities in their own right, like Mom and Dad from 1945 or Child Bride. That one's more well known, but I'm just saying these older kind of strange films that might be passed up on otherwise, if not for Something Weird or for the context and when they were made and when they were released. But I think I said before, I don't totally know Something Weird's involvement with AGFA, the American Genre Film Archive. I think it's only partial. But to my knowledge, I imagine a handful of their titles probably come from uh, Something Weird videos. Somebody smarter than me can figure all this out. But AGFA put out just so many cool titles, so many strange titles that I think now when they get released in these collections, it's more they're easier to digest, because when you're putting out these films on their own, and when you are charging money for one film, and it's some nonsense, truly, it's a little harder to take in. But when you have these collections they've been doing, with names like the Teenage Riot Video Party, or the Crazy Kids Video Party, or the True Crime Triple Ripper, it really evokes that sort of feeling of like, ooh, I'm gonna see a triple feature of these strange films I've never heard of. And that's kind of the fun. That actually, no, that is the fun. Regardless if they're good or bad, the discovery of just these total oddities that have been lost to time, that otherwise would not have been given the time of day, let alone a restoration, has been really, really great to see. I don't buy all their titles. I do buy a handful, and I definitely have to assess the situation in terms of the films that get released. But they've released a lot of stuff that I've really been attracted to. That John, I never know how to say his last name, Moritsugu, I think is how you say his name, Terminal Degeneration. The films of him, I really like that collection. I haven't watched all the films in there, but I really like that. And just, they've released the Doris Wishman films. I have one of those sets. Doris Wishman films are a little tricky to get through. They're a little repetitive, a little too repetitive for me. Um, but I always love seeing what they're putting out. A lot of cool stuff, and a lot of stuff that even if it's not so cool, it's cool that it's getting released. I'm gonna sip of this coffee here. and worth keeping an eye out for as well. Because I did recently watch. Oh, I thought I had a cat behind me. Oh, gosh, that was crazy. I did recently watch a cool film. Cool film from, speaking of Last House on the Left, cool film from a director who has been mentioned on the show quite a bit, and that is Chuck Vincent with allegedly his debut. Although, after talking to Rick Marks, you find out that it's not entirely accurate, some of the listings on the Internet Movie Database, but his quote unquote debut film, Voices of Desire. And I say in conversation with Last House on the Left, because you have Sandra Peabody, who was in Last House on the Left. She played Marie, which is funny because, and she's also in Legend of Boggy Creek, which is funny because in the trailer for Last House on the Left, they say Marie, Marie and her friend, and then everyone in the movie calls her Mary, but then the subtitle says Marie. I don't know. She's also in Massage Parlor Murders, and I don't remember a thing about Massage Parlor Murders. All I remember is that I did not like it. But I actually have it on the shelf over there. I think on 4K. That is crazy. Massage Parlor Murders is in 4K. But that's great. And Teenage Hitchhikers, which I have seen. I've actually seen most of her films, which aren't many. But I have seen Last House on the Left, Legend of Boggy Creek, Voices of Desire, Massage Parlor Murders, ! And Teenage Hitchhikers. I have not seen Legacy of Satan, but it looks like she's just a cult extra in that. But Voices of Desire, what a cool film, I tell you. A total midnight film in that you watch it and you start to blend reality and dream. There's great photography in this. You see Chuck Vincent early on, the way that he frames certain things works, like I said before, a little rough around the edges, but still so cool, where you have Sandra walking down the street and the camera pointed up at her, the skyline behind her, and this really kind of nauseating feel of just like, ooh, very wobbly. You have a man in silhouette, he's playing piano, standing in front of a curtain, or perhaps actually he's playing piano, he's sitting down. I watched this about a couple weeks ago or so. I'm going purely off memory. I have no notes on this, but it's a sexual film. It's a cult film about a cult that's going after this girl, this voice that she hears, which does get pretty repetitive right off the bat. Well, not right off the bat. It starts off cool. It starts off like this very, very mellow, very somber kind of voice, and they keep on going with it, and you go, all right, I got it. But this was made before Last House on the Left, although released after the fact. Last House on the Left was 1972, and this is listed, I guess, after, but I don't know if it was released after. There's a commentary on that Blu-ray, which I would like to listen to, as well as some other shorts. It also has the second film of Fly Now, Pay Later, which I have not seen, but is directed by B.H. Dial. That name sounds familiar, doesn't it? I'm not going to look it up. Or maybe it doesn't sound familiar. I don't know. You know what? I think I just made that up because I'm looking on his IMDb now, and he only has 2 films. So whoever Mr. B.H. Dial is, I must be confusing you with somebody else. Anyways, it's a great film, man. It's a really cool film. The way that Chuck Vincent photographs his women, you see how much love he gives into them. The way the camera is almost entirely focused on them, the way that the sex is filmed, which, by the way, it's wild that this was in 1972 because this was right on the cusp of the end of softcore. I mean, even at this point, when we're getting more unsimulated sex into films, or even unsimulated sexual activity, because at this point you have, I Am Curious Yellow, which is making the rounds, and that's not a hardcore film, but that is a film with some, I won't get into the specifics of it, but it's a film that was definitely raising eyebrows. And I feel like with the content of this film, the softcore goes about as far as it can before you actually see something more explicit. And I think this was on probably the last legs around this point where softcore really wasn't being made as much anymore. And Chuck Vincent would go into hardcore, like a lot of the directors did. Even the Amero Brothers, I'm talking about before when they were doing the softcore nudie kind of stuff with the Findlays, they really didn't want to do hardcore features. Blonde Ambition has hardcore scenes in it, but it was not something that they were particularly interested in. But were almost, you could say, forced into to put these scenes in. I really can't recommend that book enough, American Ecstasy, and it's about the lives of these two brothers, which I've talked about on the show before, just how excellent of a book that is. Where even if you're not into the history of adult films, just the story of those two brothers and just what they went through and everything that happened, it's so touching and it's moving, and it's just one of my favorite film books. And so I went completely away from Voices of Desire. It's one that you have to get with the mood of it. If you're gonna find it repetitive. But I think just the way that some of the interiors were lit, the way the black and white photography is shot, with a lot of shadows, a lot of harsh lighting, a lot of interiors in the background just out of focus or in complete black. It does have that surreal nightmare quality. I think I said this was black and white, which is not true. I'm getting, for whatever reason in my head, I think because I was just looking at the page for The Ultimate Degenerate, I was getting the two mixed up. Although Fly Now Pay Later, I believe, is in black and white. But either way, I really like this film a lot. I'm going off memory here, so I do apologize for not as specific as I should be if I had taken notes. Also, Marlene Willoughby shows up. That's great to see Marlene Willoughby in Voices of Desire. She's great. She's in the film for a little bit. She's doesn't really have she's really kind of like a background sort of character, but it's great to see her pop up. And I'd recommend that. So yeah, it's all in a melting pot of this era of the Finleys, of the films being released at this time that were being shown in these grindhouse cinemas. And when you look up these filmmakers and you look up the films when they were released, what the intentions were, whether you like or dislike, I think it does allow a new appreciation and a new context for them beyond just seeing it on maybe a VHS tape with no sort of prior knowledge and no sort of idea of what you're getting into. But that'll wrap it up for this episode. I appreciate you guys listening, and this coffee is just about finished. It's getting a little cold too, so I'm going to refill the coffee cup, and until next time.